4 miles. That is all that separates the arrivals hall at John F. Kennedy International Airport from the tennis courts at Flushing Meadows. Both places are in the same New York City borough, Queens, and connecting them is a stretch of Roosevelt Avenue that locals have known as Little Manila for longer than Alexa has even been around, especially here in North America.
Actually here in North America. So maybe in New York I'll have a bit more time, and I know there are a lot of places there. So
4 miles. That is all that separates the arrivals hall at John F. Kennedy International Airport from the tennis courts at Flushing Meadows. Both are located in the same New York City borough, Queens, and between them stretches Roosevelt Avenue, a corridor locals have called Little Manila for longer than Alexa has been alive, especially here in North America. So, when her plane touched down from Cincinnati this week, the 21-year-old Filipina, ranked a career-high number 20 in the world, stepped into a borough where the 2014 census estimates sheet counted 262,375 Filipino Americans across the wider metropolitan area. Most were citizens, and most had been settled here for decades. She did not bring that community with her. She landed right in the middle of it, and that is why the question hanging over all the noise coming out of New York this week is not the obvious one. It is not whether she can win a match at the 2026 U.S. Open, which begins Sunday, August 30th, something nobody, including her, can promise. The stranger question has been sitting in plain sight throughout her entire tour. Where does a crowd this loud actually come from for a player who has never played a professional tournament on her own soil? That question matters more than the scoreboard. And I want to show you why before we go any further. Because if you have spent any time watching Alex Eala's matches across North America this summer, the DC Open final where the stands became a sea of Philippine flags, the National Bank Open in Toronto, where a reported sellout of around 10,000 fans erupted for her at SoBi Stadium, or the Cincinnati crowd that backed her more loudly than the American across the net. The easy story is the flattering one. The easy story says a star is emerging and her fandom is growing match by match, upset by upset. That story is not wrong. It is simply incomplete. And getting that distinction right matters. Because the incomplete version treats Filipino tennis fans as something Alex created, when the evidence quietly keeps pointing to the opposite. They were already there. Getting that backwards reduces a community that has existed in New York, New Jersey, Toronto, and Washington since long before a left-handed player from Quezon City ever picked up a racket. So before we talk about the crowd, before we talk about the welcome, before we talk about the tournament that has not even started, we owe this story one honest question. Who was already there? Stay with me. This one is worth the 24 minutes. And if it lands for you, hit subscribe because we do one of these every day, and the diaspora side of this sport does not get told anywhere else. Here is the quick context, and I will keep it tight so we can reach the interesting part. Alex Eala is 21, a lefty from Quezon City in Metro Manila. She has trained since age 13 at the Rafael Nadal Academy in Mallorca. As of August 3rd, 2026, she is ranked number 20 in the world by the WTA, a career high she reached after winning the Mubadala DC Open. It was her first WTA Tour singles title, earned over top seed Jessica Pegula, 4-6, 6-4, 6. She became the first Filipina in WTA history to win a tour-level title. In 2025, she became the first Filipino man or woman to win a Grand Slam main draw singles match in the Open era when she defeated 14th seed Clara Tauson at last year's U.S. Open, 6-3, 2-6, 7-6 in the third set tiebreak. This summer at Wimbledon, she defeated defending champion Elina Svitolina and reached the second week of a major for the first time in Filipino tennis history. She is 7-2 against top 10 opponents this year. That is who she is on paper. Now let us do the thing paper cannot do. Here is the first paradox. Alex Eala has no home tournament. The Philippines does not host a WTA-sanctioned event on the calendar. She has never played a professional tour match in front of a Manila crowd. And yet, across 3 different countries in a 5-week span, she has walked onto courts that looked and sounded like home stadiums. In Washington, D.C. in early August, in Toronto in mid-August, and now before she has even hit a competitive ball in New York, players who represent nations with home crowds usually get that support in one city. Eala got it in 3. How does a player without a home tournament somehow gain a home court advantage every time she steps outside her own country? Hold that thought. Here is the second paradox, and this one comes with a very specific date. August 24th, 2025. 1 year ago, almost to the day, at the exact same U.S. Open complex, Alex Eala was ranked number 75 in the world. She was facing 14th seed Clara Towson in the first round. By every metric broadcasters normally use to decide whose match deserves attention, she was an outsider. Yet she came back from 5-1 down in the third set. The Inquirer's account of that match recorded a detail that the tennis press largely underplayed at the time. During the first set, Clara Towson complained to the umpire twice about the noise. At one point, the umpire reminded the crowd not to get too excited during the point. That is the kind of partisan volume we usually associate with French crowds at Roland Garros or American crowds at the US Open. It is not what you expect when the world number 75 is playing her first US Open main draw match. So who exactly was already sitting in those seats at 11 in the morning on a Monday, loud enough to make a top 15 player feel outnumbered? Hold that too. Here is the third paradox, and this was the one that made me stop. Mark Ein is the chairman and owner of the DC Open. He has run that tournament for years and has watched plenty of players attract plenty of crowds. After Eala's title run, he told Filipino media on camera that he wanted to personally thank the Filipino community for the demand they had brought to the tournament, demand that multiple reports from Washington described as something he had not seen at that scale before. Now, ordinarily, when a tournament suddenly draws a huge crowd around a rising player, the pattern is gradual, bigger in year 2 than year 1, bigger in year 3 than year 2. That is what a fan base being built usually looks like. But that is not what happened in Washington. The crowd arrived fully formed the first serious time Eala showed up, which means the demand existed before the supply, which means someone had already been waiting. That is a strange sentence in professional tennis, so hold on to that word, waiting. We will come back to it. Here is the assumption I want to say out loud, because it is the assumption almost every piece of coverage about Eala this summer has quietly been built around. The assumption is that Alex Eala is building a fan base, that her wins are creating her audience, that the noise in Toronto, Washington, and now New York is simply the sound of a young star gaining supporters in real time, one convert per match. And I want to be fair to that assumption. Parts of it are true. Lindsay Davenport, calling the DC Open final for broadcast, put it this way. It is amazing the enthusiasm and how many more fans Eala has brought to this sport since March of last year. Davenport is right. More fans have come. The sport is growing around her. That much is real. But listen to Davenport's exact word. More. More fans. Not the fans, not a fan base, but more of one. The grammar of that sentence quietly contains a base that already existed, and she is describing expansion, not creation. Now listen to Jessica Pegula speaking from the podium at the DC Open after losing the final. She said she thought it was refreshing and nice to see how well Eala had handled all the fandom and stardom that came with being from the Philippines and how they had really embraced her. Pegula makes the diaspora the subject of the sentence. They embraced her. The direction of that verb moves from the community toward the player, not the player toward the community. Two of the most credible voices in the sport, 1 week apart, both accidentally describing the same true story through the same accidental grammar. So here is the reframe. You have been assuming the crowd is a fan base Alex Eala built. It is not. The crowd is a diaspora that was already there. She did not create it. She activated it. And the difference between those two verbs is the entire story. Take a breath, because that reframe is doing a lot of work, and I want to be careful with it. I am not saying Alex Eala has no role in what is happening in New York this week. Obviously she does. I am saying the community that showed up to greet her in Washington, Toronto, at JFK, and at Flushing Meadows existed before she arrived, with numbers and institutions that predate her career. And now I owe you the proof. Proof number 1 is the number I planted in the opening, and it is time to unpack it. 262,375 Filipino Americans in the New York, Northern New Jersey, Long Island statistical area, according to the 2014 census estimate. 84.12% of them were U.S. citizens. That estimate is now more than a decade old, which means that based on every migration pattern we have data on, the actual number today is larger. Nationally, the Filipino population in the United States crossed 4.1 million in the 2018 American Community Survey. More recent Migration Policy Institute analyses put the Filipino heritage population closer to 4.7 million. These are not fandoms. These are households. In Queens, the same borough that contains Flushing Meadows, there is a stretch of Roosevelt Avenue between Woodside and Elmhurst that has informally been called Little Manila for a generation. Filipino restaurants, remittance shops, community centers, and a Catholic diocese with dedicated Filipino ministries all exist there. The Asian American Federation's 2025 profile of Filipinos in New York City documents Filipino community institutions, professional networks, and cultural organizations that were operating long before Eala was born in 2005. That is not a fan base. That is infrastructure. And when infrastructure decides to show up, it does not necessarily arrive gradually. Sometimes it arrives all at once, which is exactly what happened in Washington. Proof number 2 is sitting inside the 2 quotes I already gave you, but I want to sharpen them because when you hear Davenport and Eala back to back, they are not describing the same phenomenon that dominates the coverage. They are describing what I just called activation. Davenport again said that the run in Miami really changed everything for her. Notice the phrasing. She did not say Miami created her audience. She said Miami changed something for her. What changed was visibility. What changed was that a diaspora that had been quietly watching for years suddenly had a reason to be loud in public, in front of cameras, in stadiums where they had paid full price. Eala's quote goes even further. She describes the fandom as something Eala has had to handle, something that arrived at her doorstep and became something she had to deal with. That is not the language of someone who built something from nothing. That is the language of someone who has been claimed. And that distinction is crucial because the claiming is what makes this story genuinely unusual in tennis. Coco Gauff built an audience by playing on American soil, in American colors, inside American stadiums. Naomi Osaka inherited an audience across 2 nations that already have organized tennis infrastructures. Alex Eala is doing something neither of them had to do. She is being adopted in real time across borders by a community that has no domestic tour stop to gather around and no national tennis pipeline behind her. So the community is doing the gathering itself. That is what the noise in Washington was. That is what the 10,000-strong sellout in Toronto was. That is what is happening in New York right now. It is a diaspora deciding out loud that she is theirs. Give me one more sentence between the second proof and the third, because the third is the one that reframed this for me while I was researching, and I want you inside the frame before I show it to you. If you take everything we have covered so far and ask when this actually began, when did the diaspora first show up for her in person, on the ground? The answer is not this year and it is not last year. Ready? Proof number 3. September 2022, the U.S. Open Juniors Final. Same complex, same borough, same city. Alex Eala, 17 years old, wins the junior girls title at Flushing Meadows. She becomes the first Filipino singles Grand Slam champion at any level of the sport. And Manny Pacquiao, the one Filipino athlete alive who understands the diaspora better than almost anyone else, because he built his career on the backs of Filipino crowds in Las Vegas, Los Angeles, and New York, posts publicly. A nation of over 100 million people takes pride in your accomplishment. Keep being an inspiration. Work hard and stay humble. He was not simply writing to Alex Eala. He was speaking to the community that had already gathered around her because the Filipino crowd at Flushing Meadows 2022 at a junior final in a sport where junior finals routinely play to a half-empty court was already there. 4 years before her WTA title, 4 years before Wimbledon, 4 years before New York number 20 in the world, seated in mixed doubles with Felix Auger-Aliassime and scheduled for the Stars of the Open exhibition on Arthur Ashe on August 27th. Same stadium complex, same borough, same community. They did not come to see what she might become. They came to see her come back. And that is the sentence I could not shake while writing this. The crowd is not a consequence of her stardom. Her stardom is what the crowd had been waiting for. Now, honest limits. I owe you these because a reframe only matters if it is honest about what it does not prove. This reframe does not prove that Alex Eala is not also winning new fans. She clearly is. Davenport's phrase, more fans, is real. And every match on North American television this summer has brought tennis viewers who may never have watched a WTA event before. Growth is happening. The reframe is a claim about the base, not about the growth. And there is a second thing I want to be completely straight with you about. I cannot give you a precise attendance number for whatever welcome scene played out at a New York airport, hotel lobby, or practice court this week. The broader pattern is documented. The atmosphere in DC and Toronto is documented. The demand for her Fan Week appearance is documented. But a specific counted number for a specific New York greeting scene is not something I have verified through a primary source, and I am not going to invent one. Third, and this is the part that matters most, the 2026 US Open has not started as of this recording. The main draw begins Sunday, August 30th. Reports circulating from the draw suggest her first-round opponent is Clara Tauson again, the same player she defeated in that unforgettable 2025 tiebreak. If that draw holds, it is a rematch carrying more meaning than any first round should have to carry. But I do not know the result. Nobody does. And I would rather sit honestly inside that uncertainty than pretend to know something I cannot. What we do know is that she comes into New York off a Cincinnati third-round loss to Amanda Anisimova 4-6, 6-4, 6-2 on August 19th. It was a match in which she led 2-love in the deciding set at and then dropped 6 straight games. Her own words from the Cincinnati press conference were simple. Momentum is a thing, I guess, but it's not concrete, and it doesn't give you any 100% answers. That is the mindset she brings to New York. Clear-eyed, unpromised, and unwilling to lie to herself, which is honestly the same posture I am trying to hold for you here. So, let me bring this home. When Alex steps onto her assigned court at Flushing Meadows next week, the loudest section will not be a fan base she recruited. It will be a diaspora that has been in Queens since the 1970s, in Jersey City since long before her first swing of a racket, in Long Island, in Woodside, across the boroughs, suburbs, and commuter towns that never made it into a tennis broadcast until she gave them a reason to be seen. The 262,375 figure from 2014 was a floor, not a ceiling. The umpire warning the crowd during the 2025 toss-on match was the moment the outside world first noticed something that had been sitting there all along. Mark Ein's surprise at Filipino ticket demand in Washington was the moment a tournament chairman realized the audience had arrived before the marketing did. Manny Pacquiao's 2022 post was the community talking to itself in public 4 years before the wider world was ready to listen. The reason she looks like she belongs on Ash, the reason the noise sounds like a home crowd for a player without a home tournament, is not that she has finally earned a place in a foreign room. It is that she was already somebody's. A very specific somebody's. And that somebody has been waiting in Queens for a long time. She belongs to a community that never left the borough. And whatever happens in the draw next week, that fact is already true. It was true before her plane landed. If you are watching from New York, New Jersey, Toronto, Washington, Manila, or anywhere the Filipino community has quietly been there for decades, tell me in the comments which neighborhood was your first Little Manila. Let us build a map in the replies of the diaspora that showed up before the world was watching. Subscribe if you want more of these. We do one every day, and the diaspora side of this sport does not get told anywhere else. I will see you back here on Sunday, August 30th, when the main draw begins. The reported rematch with Clara Tauson looms, and the loudest section at Flushing Meadows finally gets its close-up. She belongs. She always did. They just found her.